Associate Professor of Environmental Engineering in the Department of Environmental Engineering and Earth Science at Wilkes University. Marlene.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to start out with a quote that I quite often use when I'm teaching, and it says, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." And it's by Albert Einstein. And I would like to concur with what my colleagues were saying. I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think we have to think more big picture. Gas drilling is important, but how does it fit into our overall energy policy? Like Brian had mentioned, I think there's a lot of issues with how we use our energy. Are we using it smartly? And also, as Dr. Klimo had said, how are we getting the information we need to make good decisions? So I think there's a lot of opportunities for discussions. I think we also have to be big picture thinking. And how does gas drilling fit into the big picture of all our energy challenges? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. You now know who our panelists are this evening and have heard their initial statements here. What I'm going to do is we're going to go through 6 questions, and I'm going to ask 3 of them to respond, and they'll have anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to respond to the question, and I will select who's going to respond to this. Do you have these questions in the handout so you can follow along and know what is being discussed? So you should have these also up here, I believe. If you don't have them, you'll be able to find some around the auditorium. Okay, so the first question is this. Have the local concerns been sufficiently addressed, including the environmental, social, and economic impacts of the Marcellus Shale natural gas exploration? And I'll start this with Brian Orm.
Well, I guess we decided to give you the easy one. The easy answer is no, obviously not. We haven't addressed, when I say we, I consider myself a we when I talk about my profession and what I hope to do. We haven't addressed those because there's been a long history of poor messaging from PR companies, poor messaging from gas companies explaining themselves. And again, poor messaging from the top down. A lot of information about groundwater quality in Pennsylvania wasn't known to the public, but it was known to a bunch of people that read scientific journals, and nobody told you guys. And I think that's part of the problem. So on that side, no, we haven't done enough. And I think the other thing, what we really need is education on energy. I mean, we're all players in this. This is something that, in my opinion, is not a side. For me, there's no sides to this issue. There is this issue, and it's energy. Where are we going to get it? How are we going to use it? How are we going to move forward and leave a place for our kids? So, on the environmental social side, I think these are the things we have to solve as a community. In my talks, that's one of my big buzzwords, is working as a community. And the other buzzword is we all live downstream. Whatever activity happens upstream of us, will flow downhill. The economic impacts, that's not my place to judge. I do know that from the consulting side, I do not have any master service agreements or contracts with gas companies. That's a decision I made about 3 years ago. I will guarantee you, though, the consulting companies that do have those contracts would not be in business in today's economy if it wasn't for those. That's only one part of the economic side, and I think that's the best I can offer.
Thank you, Brian. We'll go to question 1 next for a response from Eileen Cipriani. Eileen.
I also agree with Brian. I don't believe the local concerns have been adequately addressed. Local residents have concern about emissions, about their water. It's the safety of their water. That's something that's very relevant to everyone, and there's not been a lot of research that can lead them to any conclusion on that. I look at this as an adverse to the FDA releasing a medication and allowing it to be on the market for 2 years and then going back and seeing if it's safe. The research needs to be done in order for us to make any kind of judgment about our health and our environment. On the economic side, the state instituted an impact fee. Well, the impact fee, if you know how it goes, that where there's active drilling, the impact fee is put into place. So there are counties that are receiving a lot of money, but in Luzerne County, they receive very little because there's no active drill wells in this county. Local residents that I've talked to feel that a tax on the gas industry would be a far better solution to this. It would provide a new source of revenue to the state of Pennsylvania and maybe help fund education, which ends up being in our own local property taxes when it's not properly funded by the state. As far as social issues, this issue divides people in the neighborhood. Much of this drilling is done in close proximity to homes and businesses. It divides neighbors. One neighbor may be receiving financial benefit from the industry, while the other still has the effect of the harmful impacts possibly, but they're not getting any financial gain. And the one last one that wasn't in here is public safety. That to me is one of the primary concerns. That needs to be dealt with in the gas industry, and the county EMA and local responders need to be coordinated together and need to have a plan in place to guard the public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And Colleen Conley, would you respond also to question number 1?
As far as have the local concerns been sufficiently addressed, environmentally, socially, and economically? I can speak mostly for environmentally, but environmentally I would say we're getting there, and we're getting there to the answer of yes. And here at the DEP, we regulate the gas industry, we issue the permits, we respond to complaints. Already we have at least 2 water contamination complaints that we're investigating in Susquehanna County, as Representative Major can attest to. It's in Franklin Fork, so we're looking into that. It's taken more than 8 months to investigate that. We're doing a solid, thorough job to rely on sound science. We have some air quality compressor stations that we've had some issues with over the past couple of months, as Eileen Cipriani can attest to, the residents. We're looking into those complaints also. We're getting there. We can only respond as a regulatory agency when you, the public, get involved and tell us, hey, this is wrong, that's wrong, can you please do something about it? Will we move in a manner, in a timely fashion that you want us to? Maybe a little slower than we'd like, but we're really trying to get those answers for you. So if you come to the DEP, you call the DEP, and you need an answer to your question, we can only answer those questions and know about the problems if we hear from the public. Socially, economically, I can say the DEP would absolutely support a study by the local chambers of commerce of what the economic impact is. We absolutely would. I know there are some studies being done right now, but we'd like a broad-based study that the DEP can contribute to. Socially, that's a question for the local police departments, I believe, as to whether or not there are social problems. Do we have some social issues? Sure. We have some groups that really look into and keep an eye on the gas industry. They're represented here tonight. We like to hear from them also. Do we agree all the time? No, we don't. But I think it's a process that we're working towards to try and solve the environmental, economic, and social impacts. But it comes right down to what we hear from the public is the only thing the DEP can do to rely on solid information to get out and know about the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually have some extra time on this question. Is there another panelist who'd like to respond to question number 1? Okay, we'll move on to question number 2 then. What technological advancements or industry best practices should the public know about? How can these advancements alleviate concerns of local residents? And let's start this response with Rory Sweeney.
Sure. I think there are, from my perspective, 3 major things, advancements that the industry can tout here in PA. Number 1 being casing design. And I know Bill will probably talk about a few other ones, but the casing design has been enhanced in this region based completely on information that we found out through activity in the region. We went from a 2-string design to only had 2 sleeves of steel up to a 3-string design, specifically to address some shallow geology issues that were previously not very well known in this region, which kind of brings me to my second point. You know, a lot of what the industry activity up here in northern Pennsylvania is doing is explaining a lot more about the geology than we previously knew. There was a lot of old research that hadn't seen the light of day in a while, and with the industry focus on this area, it's become more interesting, and more people have studied it, and that's been a positive impact for the region, that we're learning more and more about the area. And the third thing that I would say is in particular, is precise horizontal drilling. And I know the term hydraulic fracturing comes up, and people think that's the new technology. That's been around for decades. It's really the precise horizontal drilling, the ability to drill 1.5 miles into the ground, and then 1 mile laterally out, and hit a 20-foot bullseye and know that you're there. That has made this, has opened up these shale plays and allowed companies like mine to continue to get a return on their investment. And one of the things that we have down in Oklahoma is what we call our 3D Viz room. It's you can actually visualize the shale in there, and they can go and see the stratigraphy of the geology and figure out where it ripples and how we would need to drill this well. So that there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of people who have worked on this well, been in the theory, looked at it theoretically before we've actually ever touched the ground, moved any earth. And when you add to that the seismic data that comes in that's used with the 3D Viz room, there's a lot of professionalism that goes into designing each one of these wells and designing the hydraulic fracture and the well completion prior to anyone even stepping onto the pad site. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to ask Bill DeRosiers to respond to that question, please.
This was perhaps my most intriguing question, and I could spend the next hour and a half talking about all the great technology advances that we've been implementing here, specifically in the Marcellus Shale. For instance, we have new rigs that are coming into the area that are designed to walk in these locations, which have cut down our drilling time dramatically from 40 days to 16. And what that means is we do not have to take apart the rigs and use energy to take apart these rigs and waste time moving them. We have the ability to simply walk the rig, and I'm going to really stress walk. It's not a very fast process, but from well to well. But perhaps the most important thing, especially when local residents should be alleviated by, is the best practices that we voluntarily implement throughout our operations. I touched on it briefly right at the beginning during our quick introductions, but one of the things Cabot is very proud of, not only itself but the industry, is 100% recycle and reusing of all the fluids we use, not only during hydraulic fracturing, but the drilling process and the production process. It's an amazing setup that we have. All the fluid is captured in steel tanks, brought to a facility called Comtech, where we use chemical precipitation to essentially take out all the undissolved solids in the water, and then that water is reused in future hydraulic fracturing operations. To date, we've saved 30% of our freshwater demand. We've cut down on 18,000 truck trips to freshwater withdrawal points this year alone, some of which could be half an hour to 45 minutes away. So if you want to do the math, how much diesel fuel and how much time on roads and road degradation we've saved, it's an amazing accomplishment. We're looking to increase that tenfold. Getting back to technology, oftentimes people ask, where are the fractures going? Are they going out of the formation? The last thing we want is those fractures to leave the formation, because that's not where the gas is. But some of the ways that we know where the fractures are going is we actually have, through technology, the ability to watch those fractures real time. The sensors have increased, the real-time computing has increased. So not only on the surface do we know how much fluid are we pumping, what's our mix, and what's our rate of fracturing down there. We have people in Houston and Pittsburgh who are watching this real time to make sure it's going to what their specifications are. We even have the ability to put down what they call geophones into existing wells to watch these fractures happening in real time, and we can map them out digitally so that we can study this in locations like Rory was discussing, or in places like Houston, Pittsburgh universities, to effectively design new fracturing methodology. One of the big things that Cabot is constantly looking is how can we get more out of the ground with doing less? And what we're proud of in Susquehanna County, we have 200 wells that are producing 1 billion cubic feet of gas a day. That's enough to power 25,000 homes for a whole year. We're doing that in a day. We have 30 years worth of drilling in West Virginia. That's 3,000 wells producing roughly 30 million cubic feet of gas a day. So when you get down to the math and the numbers, what we can do today in the Marcellus Shale, how much we can produce, the technology we're doing or using to effectively produce that, and then the best practices we employ to protect the environment is truly amazing. And I can't wait to see in 10 years from now what the industry can accomplish in this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Lastly, on question number 2, I'd like Ken Clemo to respond, please.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Thought I deferred on this one, but
well, we'll make you talk about it anyway.
All right. So the if I can admit to something, that is, I know when we were talking about the development of this forum with Rachel, this is actually the one question that I thought might be the most interesting question to ask the panelists, and whether in fact this would be a good question to actually center this discussion around. Pretty much the reason why I thought this was an intriguing question, because I think there is a disconnect between what the industry is doing and maybe what the industry thinks they're doing versus what everybody else, especially the critics of drilling, think that the industry is maybe not doing. That there's, again, this disconnect, and I thought that this would be an important question to address. Probably what really brought this home to me is back in the fall, I actually had a discussion with somebody from Penn Environment. And I know Penn Environment is a different organization from Penn Future. And they issued a report. Some of you might remember they actually came up here, and I think it was in October, and had a presentation of one of their studies that they had done, or one of their papers they prepared. And in the discussion with the person from Penn Environment about this, I mentioned, I read through their paper, and I thought that it was pretty one-sided. And the one question that I asked of the person was, well, one of the things you're not doing is you're not really giving industry enough credit for some of the advances that they have. And the response was that industry is doing nothing. They have had no advancements whatsoever. And that really indicated a severe disconnect, again, between industry's perception of what they're doing and how other people perceive how they're doing. So, again, I think, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but it's important that we try to get on the same page and we actually hear what each other's saying, and maybe try not to be so inflexible in our opinions. But I'll say more about that later on.
Good, thank you very much. Appreciate you taking that. Anyway, that surprised you. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. What kind of regulations help to govern both the infrastructure, road maintenance, long-term monitoring of wells and pipelines, as well as the economic impacts, including appropriate taxation and distribution of these taxes? And we'll start that with our regulator, Colleen Conley.
Thank you. Well, as I said before, DEP, we're the agency that regulates the natural gas industry. Natural gas companies cannot drill unless we tell them they can drill, issue them a permit. If there's a problem, we can yank that permit, or we can cite, or we can fine them. What type of regulations exist with the infrastructure as far as maintenance, long-term monitoring? It is self-monitoring, but we do subject the gas companies to unannounced visits to make sure they are following the rules and the regulations of their permit. We do subject the natural gas compressor stations to surprise visits as to what they're doing. Are they following the regulations? So that happens. We do rely on self-monitoring. That's how it goes in the state of Pennsylvania. We get our cue from Harrisburg. Harrisburg sets the laws that we can find in the rules and the regulations that we tell the gas companies they have to follow. Maintenance, we do look at gas companies with their trucks. Are they spilling a lot of dirt on the highway? Are there air quality issues with what they're hauling from the fracking material from the trucks? We subject them to clean air policies, making sure that they are following the rules and regulations of that. Long-term monitoring, we're trying to get into a long-term study. We're working with Harrisburg to do a long-term study on the impacts of natural gas in the state of Pennsylvania. We already have a long-term study on air quality, or excuse me, compressor stations, an air quality study as to air quality